Hello, Palm Springs International Film Society. My name is Lili Rodriguez. I'm the artistic director, and thank you so much for joining us on this Q&A for Stray. I am joined today by the director of Stray, Elizabeth Lowe. Elizabeth, welcome.
Hi, it's such an honor to be here.
Thank you for being here, and all the way from Hong Kong, too.
Yeah, I'm normally based in LA, but I'm here with family right for now.
I want to start off by congratulating you on this really beautiful, everyone's calling it a love letter to dogs, and it really is that plus more. I'd like if you could start us off at the beginning and let us know how long has this idea of making a film about stray dogs has been inside of your brain?
Yeah, it's been 5 years in the making, so it's a strange year to release the film. But my own childhood dog had passed away a long time ago. But I always remember wanting to use sort of the skills that I've grown into, which is filmmaking, to to sort of give cinematic time and space to narratives that are not often and beings who are not often whose lives are not considered sort of significant enough for storytelling or for a 70-minute movie. And so that sort of set me on the journey to find a stray dog to follow and to tell the story of.
And how did you end up in Turkey?
Turkey, so I was originally the idea for the film was for it to be a cultural study of how the status of a stray dog can change depending on the cultural context that that stray dog finds himself in. And the purpose of that, in my mind, originally was to sort of reveal how arbitrary the value that we assign different species and beings is. And to in the end assert sort of the fundamental value of all species and beings. If you just paid close enough attention, no matter how mundane, that you'd find richness there. But I said it in Turkey. Turkey was one of the first places that we went to because it was at the time from 2017 to 2019 undergoing so much turmoil as a society. It was emerging out of the wake of terrorism, the influx of refugees, and sort of the rise of authoritarianism. And we wanted to see if the peripheral gaze of a dog in a city could take the pulse of what was happening in Istanbul, but also in the world at large. And another part of that is that Turkey has these incredible laws that people fought for in 2004, where it's illegal to euthanize any healthy stray dog or even hold them in captivity. And even if the government does pick up a stray dog to vaccinate them, they have to return them to the place where they found them, which is such a profound level of respect for non-human life that I can hardly imagine if those laws were written in the United States. And so they have this huge, thriving and healthy stray dog population that is communally cared for by the government and by the people. And that's why the film was set there.
That's fascinating. Can you give us a little bit more background as to how those laws came into effect and maybe the culture, that brought about these laws?
Yeah, for sure. It's this fascinating history that I genuinely believe that Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs, the premise of that has to be somewhat based on this historical reality in Turkey. In the 1900s, as the Ottoman Empire was crumbling, a British diplomat happened to be in Istanbul and was chased by a pack of dogs and fell to his own death. Not by the fault of the dogs, but the British government, in retaliation, outsized retaliation, demanded that the Turkish one round up all their stray animals and kill them all. And so to avoid the immorality of killing their own dogs, their city's dogs, the Sultan ended up rounding all of them up and banishing them to this island where they would inevitably starve to death. And the Istanbulites could hear the dogs howling off of the mainland. And shortly afterwards, all these huge fires broke out in the city because there were no dogs to warn people. And then World War I happened. And so Istanbulites tied the exiling of the dogs to a curse and all the misfortunes that was happening in Turkey. And so over the next 100 years, people would protect dogs even as the government was trying to eradicate them from the streets in this attempt to westernize and modernize and conform to the idea of what a civilized city looks and sounds like. But in 2004, finally, mass protests against the killings of stray dogs brought these laws into effect. So
Wow.
it's the will of the people and a testament to non-human resilience that Zeytin and her companions are allowed
Wow.
to exist and roam freely.
Mm. And speaking of Satan, I can't get that image of Satan's face out of my mind. How did you find Satan?
So during our scout, we didn't have anything in our schedule. We kind of were just trying to be open to the city's dogs and see who spoke to us. And we were in this underground tunnel. We saw these two dogs weaving between people's feet very urgently. And so in our minds, it was kind of like a Alice in Wonderland moment where you're like, where is the white rabbit or that dog, the stray dog going? What appointment could it possibly have to get? The owner has no job. And they happened to be on the heel, and those dogs happened to be Zeytin and Nazar, the protagonists of the film, and they happened to be on the heels of the young Syrian men who become a prominent part of their storyline. And that was how we discovered Zeytin. And she emerged as the star of the film, I think, because of the quality that you're so drawn to. I think when you describe her face, I don't know what it is about her face, but there's something like a great actress that's very cinematic about, where her eyes are, the wrinkles on her face. And she was also one of this rare dogs, and actually the only dog in our entire production who didn't react so actively to the camera. And she allowed me to get so close to her face, and she would still just either stare right past me or into the barrel of the camera, and in a way that most dogs wouldn't be able to do. And actually, I spoke to a dog behaviorist about this who was on a panel with me, and she said Zeytin's behavior is pretty singular for a dog, to be able to be that independent and disengaged from somebody filming you, in front of you, and not be a professional actor. She was special.
Wow. And I imagine you filmed a number of dogs before landing on Zeytin.
Kind of, yeah, but we discovered her pretty early on, and she took over the narrative in the edit. And I think one of the reasons for that is I really wanted the film to be an exploration of life away from the centers of power and to recenter a narrative around a non-human gaze and to see where that would take us. And inadvertently in production, a lot of the other dogs that we tried to film with, they would end up, after spending some days with us, would end up following us back. So it would be impossible to follow them any longer because they were just following where we were going, and which undermined the premise, because then it would just be my will, my human will. But Zeytin was one of the few dogs that wouldn't inadvertently follow us back because she was so radically independent. And then we could fulfill sort of the promise and intention of the film, which is to let a dog take us where she wants us to, and let the film be an experiment in what happens when
Gosh,
you leave the narrative up to a dog.
Yeah, you really struck gold in terms of documentarian and subject and having the perfect dog. That's amazing. I'd like, you mentioned the Syrian boys, and I think that's, we said that the movie's it's about dogs, but and from the point of view of dogs, which is so distinct, but it also touches on this whole other world and humanitarian issues. And was it your intent to find sort of a human interest component to this?
It wasn't my intent. I think I wanted to see where the dog would take us, but I've reflected a lot on that question, and I feel like it's this inevitability in a way, because I think if you told the story of any stray dog or any dog, that because of how they've evolved and how they are in their DNA, they evolved to be around us. they're defined in a lot of ways, and us them, by our relationships to them. And so I would have had to very intentionally and actively denied reality to turn my camera away from the relationships that Zeytin was forming in the streets at that time in Istanbul. And in the streets, I think there's this really incredible, you see all the people that she's around in the film, whether it's the women protesters on the streets, whether it's the men around the bonfire, or the young men in Syria. They're all people who are having to spend time in public spaces because of lack of access to private spaces, or having to go to public spaces to make their point. And I think there's a lot of parallels in this journey of having to fend for yourself on the margins of society, and to resist what forces may be trying to persecute you. And even though I think the status of stray dogs is secure in Istanbul now, I think much like any population that is dispossessed or unprotected by wealth or military might, that there's a lot of precarity in the status of a stray dog or a refugee or women. And so I see a lot of parallels there.
Right. Can you talk about filming? I mean, you mentioned that you're based in the States. Can you talk about filming in Istanbul? And do you speak Turkish?
No, I don't speak Turkish at all. And it was such a privilege to be a complete outsider in that society and to be filming dogs there, because I think I was allowed into conversations and to eavesdrop on them, as Zeytin does, in a way that I maybe would not have been had I been Turkish, or had people assumed I understood what they were saying. And a lot of times I felt, as a filmmaker filming the dogs and people, that I was having to sort of become more and more dog-like in my understanding of the world, which is to understand people through non-verbal communication, to read people's body language, to understand what was happening on a visceral level. And I also think the fact that the film was about dogs, these innocuous stray dogs, really helped people sort of let their guard down.
Mm-hmm. You said you filmed 3 years?
Yeah, 3 years, 6 months over the course of 3 years, or 7 months over the course of 3 years.
And you really do capture this POV from the dog's perspective. And I want to know more about the actual filming and the production of it, how that all worked.
Yeah, it was so important to me that the film about dogs really try to visually embody sort of a dog's world, eye view, because I feel like so many films that have been made about dogs don't truly even attempt to take on their perspective. Figuring out a rig that would allow me to do that felt like it was very meaningful, that it would have an impact on audiences when you see the world from a defamiliarized gaze and from a height that we're not used to. So I used an easy rig, which is this device that hangs all the weight off of the gimbal and the camera onto your hips rather than your hands. And I would just kind of crouch low and follow the dogs that way. And kind of over time, I adjusted myself to the rhythms of dogs, and there were sounds and smells that I couldn't hear that would, lure the dogs away and make them dart off and run away. And I just kind of had to learn to roll with it, even in not knowing what they were hearing or smelling.
It's fascinating. And did filming in this way, I mean, I'm sure it did, but how did that inform what you were capturing, or how did that inform the edit later? And I don't know, maybe that answered it actually. So
no. Another technical point of how we followed stray dogs is, they don't have human owners. So there's no way to communicate with the dogs where they would be the next day after filming. So we got sponsored by this pet tracking company called Tractive GPS, which had these little GPS trackers you could attach to a collar. And we would put them on Zeytin and Nazar at the end of every night. And then you'd be able to track over the phones what they were doing the whole night. And the next day we'd be able to find them. So that's how we logistically managed keeping up with stray dogs in this huge city of Istanbul.
That's great. Did you ever consider putting GoPros on? I'm sure you did, considered all the different options.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. We tried to put GoPros on the dogs, and there's only one scene in the film. It's the theft of the puppy that is shot on GoPro by Zeytin. And it's because at that time I didn't know that they were stealing the young puppy. And so wasn't filming. And Zeytin happened to be
Oh,
filming
wow.
that integral scene. And I really would have loved a film where I didn't even have to be there and the dogs could go out with GoPros and you'd see everything that was happening around them. But it was too nauseating, the footage, when I saw the test footage. And also it was really important to me that the film be beautiful and immersive, to give them the visual treatment that you would afford sort of an independent actress in an indie film. That was really important to me, to elevate Zeytin's story and the people around her to the level that you would any other sort of fiction film with beautiful cinematography. That was really important. The visual gravity that would afford, because I wanted audience to get over the hump that this protagonist is not human, and to assume that she had a rich inner life, even though she wasn't saying anything.
And Elizabeth, why was it so important to you that people really see the world through the eyes of a dog?
I think I'm of the belief that our anthropocentric worldview that places humans at the center of everything is responsible for a lot of the destruction around the world. And also, pain on a very basic level to the millions and billions of animals that are used and exploited every day, because they're not even considered within our moral circles of consideration. And I think that was the driving force in wanting to see the world from a different perspective, a non-human one, and a validation of sort of the lives of others who are not like us. And also I also tend to believe that any depiction of society or interpretation of it is more accurate from the peripheries than from the center, and from the people and beings who are considered less powerful than those with a lot of power.
Have you had the chance to share the film with the Syrian boys or Turkey in general yet?
No, not yet. We don't have distribution there yet, but I am actually planning some impact screenings where we're hoping to work with animal rights organizations there to host screenings. Unfortunately, they have to be virtual, so I think it's difficult to be able to share it with the young Syrian men. But I think when I get a chance to visit there again, physically, when COVID allows, I definitely want to host physical screenings and invite the stray dogs and the young men to the screening to watch the film, even if it's years later.
Yeah, that'd be fabulous. Have you stayed in touch with the young men and Zeytin? Or do you know where she's up to?
There's no way for me to stay in touch with them because they don't have cell phones or they don't have regular plans. But my co-producer, Zeynep Kopperlu, she lives in Istanbul, and she regularly either runs into the young men or Zeytin snoozing on the streets in the same places that she is in the film. So I know Zeytin is doing well despite the pandemic.
And finally, could you let us know maybe something that you're taking away with you after having made Stray?
Sort of like a lesson?
Yeah, a lesson or a memory, or maybe something that's going to inform, the way that you make shorts in the future.
I think for me, on a very profound level, I feel like Stray is this document of a culture and a time and place when this particular type of being, a stray dog, is still tolerated and embraced. And I think that can change overnight, as it has in our societies. We've turned our backs against stray dogs. We've even sort of morally conceived of it as repulsive that dogs would be able to roam freely. And that stays with me. that experience of having my own assumptions about what a humane relationship with another species is like and what a humane or diverse city looks like. And over the course of making this film, I realized my presumptions were all wrong and that it was actually the opposite, at least in my experience and what I observed, and how these dogs' lives are really rich, lived on their own terms, away from people. And I think that experience of sort of decolonizing my own mind in terms of not imposing Western framework of what's right and what's wrong, that was a really important lesson for me. And I hope to carry on that impulse of questioning the conventions that are so destructive, these narratives that are so dominant, and challenging them into my future work too.
And I really do think that all of that shines through in this work, and I cannot wait what else you have in store. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having my film, and I hope people enjoy Stray.